So welcome everyone to another episode of Exploring Concept Art. Apologies for the huge delay in getting this tutorial out. I've been extremely busy with university work and marking students' work and end of year show and all that. So anyway, without further ado, let's get down to it. So with this tutorial I was exploring concept art, exploring landscapes using black and white, so not using any colour at all. So this is a very good way to establish values with your painting. It's easy to kind of get lost in in colour. So as you can see here, I'm just sketching out, really just playing around with ideas of some basic architecture of the scene, some mountains. I'm not entirely sure at this point what I'm going to be doing, but I'm just kind of sketching it out, trying out various things, shapes. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to stay with this, it's just to get an idea. So I'll start putting the background in, so I highly recommend this. Always start from the back and work to the front. So I'm putting in general kind of sky. One of the great things about when you're working in black and white is it really helps with establishing light and dark. Painting's mostly about light. There's technique involved, but the light's really important, particularly with painting. Perhaps not so much with drawing, but with painting it's really, really important. So I put a bit of a background in there, and then I start sketching in this kind of mountainous area. I'm using the smudge tool, so those familiar with my work, I'll usually start off with using brush, and I'll use the smudge tool, and I use brush 14. Make sure that you've got shape dynamics set in your brush tool, and just start sketching it out. So just generally getting an idea. I have a vague idea of what I want to achieve, but generally I'll let the forms kind of what's the word I'm looking for? I'll let the forms not necessarily dictate, but kind of take the lead, and then I'll kind of adapt it. So it's kind of like organised chaos. I'll just kind of see how it goes, play around with some shapes, see what kind of happens, and if there's something that kind of catches my eye, I'll emphasise that a bit more. So what I'm doing here is I'm just kind of putting some mountains in a mountain in the distance, one in the midground and then one in the foreground, and just blocking it out. Another thing to remember as well, I don't know what kind of computer you're using at home, but this is the one that I've got. It's okay, but it does struggle with 300 pixels, so I have to knock everything down to about 100 if we want to do any smudging. Anything higher than that, there's a real delay on it. So my advice is, when you're doing stuff like this, do everything on a kind of low res, and then as you start going into more detail, you can just go into image size, and readjust it. So take it up to 200, up to 300. I wouldn't say go much further than that, but certainly if you want to kind of do any close-up detail, you don't want it being sort of pixelated. So I blocked in most of the scene here. I was playing around this idea of kind of putting a reflection of the of that mountain in there. Again, wasn't quite sure about that. Then I used the smudge tool and kind of took the power of the smudge down, so I could kind of like blur it and kind of smudge it more, as opposed to just kind of painting with the colour. So you can see there, I got quite a nice effect with the suggestion of kind of just slight kind of ripples in this kind of lake scene. Using the soft brush just to kind of add a bit of haze, and then kind of just working back into it again with the smudge tool. So there's a lot of sort of going back and forth with the with the brushes, with the smudge, putting some of the mountains in there, trying to create a sense of gradation, of things being in the distance, things being in the foreground. So start sketching in the kind of main foreground now. So this is where I'm going to have my character. Up until this point, I'd not really decided what I was going to put in here. I thought I'd have a character, and I just kind of played around well, you'll see anyway. I kind of put a character in there and then I started kind of having other ideas. So how I tend to kind of work is I'll do a bit of work on that, and then I'll sort of go back and I'll kind of do the little bits of the picture and then come back to it again. Just put in bits of kind of grass sort of shapes in here. So again, I'm trying to keep everything loose. It's very easy to kind of get lost in too much detail when you're doing painting. So my advice is, particularly when you're doing this kind of painting, is work loose. So I'm starting to kind of put this character in here. At this point, I was kind of thinking, yeah, kind of more fantasy as opposed to kind of sci-fi. I was thinking more kind of something more like sort of Skyrim or something like that. So I thought, right, okay, I'll kind of get this kind of mythical kind of character in there, warrior type character, and trying to stay away from putting any real detail in there. It's just a suggestion, it's a silhouette, so you don't really want to put too much detail in there. A vague suggestion of some details, but that's about it. And carrying on with the picture, just really shaping it. So using the eraser tool as well. So the rubber tool or eraser tool is really good for painting with as well. You wouldn't, wouldn't perhaps be a choice of tool, but I find the eraser tool in Photoshop really helpful, just for kind of like, it's a bit like kind of using clay. I don't know if anyone's used clay before, but you can add things to kind of whatever you're making, and then you can kind of chop it away. I kind of look at painting being very much the same thing. I kind of put a lot of kind of mass in there, and then I kind of chop away at it and try and kind of get something that's, but hacking away at the shape, as it were, as opposed to having a finished kind of form. So this is starting to take shape. I've got this in there, and I'm kind of quite happy with that. And I thought, well, it's kind of missing something. It felt a little bit kind of empty. So I started entertaining this idea of putting something in there. I wasn't quite sure what, but anyway, in a minute now you'll kind of see, after I started kind of putting some of these details in here, I was figuring it needed something to kind of balance up on the right hand side. So just really doing a final bit of tweaking. And then I thought, of course, dragon, right? So this guy's going to ride in his dragon, and he's decided to take a bit of a break at the side of this lake here. So he's got his dragon there waiting for him. So again, wasn't quite sure about the form of this. I was kind of adding some bits to it. And I thought, well, he's going to have horns, right? And he's going to be sort of stood there behind him. So he's not, didn't want it to kind of look like too threatening, like it was kind of, creeping up behind him. So I just tried to kind of create the sense that he was, this kind of almost like a dog, just kind of doting over his master, waiting to kind of see what happens next. So again, kind of put the kind of paint in there, use the erase tool, use the smudge tool, started putting a bit more detail in there. Didn't want to put too much of the dragon in there, so I want to give this sort of suggestion of just kind of having his paw kind of there, a bit of its shoulder and the paw. I wasn't quite happy with how that was kind of turning out, particularly the kind of paw, so I kind of started working on that and then sort of took it out, and then started working with something, just kind of fiddling around really until I kind of got the shape that I was happy with. And so the picture was pretty much kind of coming close to an end now, kind of adding a bit more grass. Thought I'd give him a bit of a glowing eye, so I kind of use a soft brush on this and kind of put an eye in there, a bit of a glow. And again, just a final bit of tweaking. I'd pretty much finished with the background at this point. Put a bit of tweaking in there, put some teeth in there, and just kind of set this little scene. And that's pretty much it over by the shouting, really. So I do highly recommend working in black and white. As I mentioned before in the beginning, it's very good for establishing the light and dark, and putting more emphasis on really the sort of cinematography, if you will. The way that a DOP on a film would work is really looking at the contrast, the characters against the background, and black and white really has that. ability to do that without getting lost in the noise, if you will, of colours. So yeah, so just put a few little bits and bobs in there, a bit of sort of smoke coming from its mouth. So that's pretty much it, really. So I'm hoping now that college is pretty much, or university is pretty much over and done with. I'll be able to dedicate a lot more time now to doing some more tutorials. I might even be doing some little bits in Mudbox. I'll see how I go with that. Maybe some stuff with Unreal. I'll see about that as well. But the main emphasis is really with Photoshop, doing some character designs, maybe designing some assets, and maybe seeing how they translate into making them in Maya. But we'll see how far we get on this little journey. So that's pretty much it. So hope you enjoyed the little tutorial. Apologies once again for the huge delay. Just been incredibly busy with the end of year show. So that's it. Until next time, folks. Hope you enjoyed it. Good luck with your painting. If you've got any questions, feel free to leave some comments below. And that's it. And hope you have a good time using Photoshop. Bye for now.